Welcome back to CMST 245 at South Seattle Community College, our online course with your instructor, Rebecca McCarthy. This week we're going to talk a little bit about Chapter 5 in Intertextuality and Web-Based Public Discourse. But I want to spend most of my time talking about this concept of intertextuality so that you have a better understanding of why this concept is important not only for rhetorical theory but also for literary theory, and how it applies differently between a normal text such as a book, for example, and many of the kind of texts we find online. So let's get to it, shall we? The authors start out by offering an example on page, 75, regarding the Huffington Post, and they had a parody video recounting President Obama's many challenges during the first years in office. The reason the authors use this video is it has many different aspects of intertextuality. For example, the song from Gilbert and Sullivan, The Pirates of Penzance, actually has certain meaning, whereas the information given in the videos, that is what happened during President Obama's first year, also has different meaning. These many different meanings layered on top of each other within this presentation constitutes intertextuality. So what the authors do is they offer us in the beginning a good example of what intertextuality looks like before they dive in and give us an explanation or a definition, if you will, of intertextuality. But some of the important elements that we need to think about when considering this term is that intertextuality depends on the cultural matrix of readers' experience and general knowledge, as well as the salient current events known to the public and also to other texts. And that is a quote from page 77. So what is important is that intertextuality works fully only when the audience can bring together all the loose pieces that are being presented or played upon in the particular text, in this case the video given by Huffington Post. So that is important to keep in mind because intertextuality does pull on many different aspects of life, of knowledge, of culture, and if us as the audience are in tune with those different aspects, then the more the intertextuality exists, the more information and the more we get out of the presentation in general. But why are we even concerned? I mean, it seems, to me at least, it seems rather logical that this idea of intertextuality, that you have a whole bunch of different influences all coming together in order to make one message or text, is a very normal thing to run into. And it does become important because when you look at a lot of early theory regarding rhetoric and also literature, what you find is there's a lot of people who would suggest that novels and books and newspapers and TV programs, political programs, whatever you were watching, tended to give a one language of truth. And when we look at a one language of truth, what we normally actually look at is a form of propaganda. That's when we try to get everybody to think the exact same way and to use the same belief system and ethics and cultural norms in order to create a monologue, or what is often called monologic utterance, or that is a singular point of view. So when we look at the difference between something that is intertextual compared to something that is one text or one monologue or one voice or one unitary form of language, we're looking also at the difference not only between what aspects we're pulling in to make our text dynamic, but we are also looking at whether or not we are presenting a one cultural point of view compared to a diversity or a dialogue, right? So now in our chapter, one of the people that is discussed a lot about when looking at this definition is Bakhtin. And Bakhtin is a rather important theorist for literary theory and also rhetorical theory because he's one of the first people that made this distinction between a unitary language, right, a language that presents just one voice, and an intertextual language or a dialogic language, a language and a text that presents many different points of view in order to create a whole. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read a little bit from this author's actual text. So this is not in our textbook. This is in the Dialogic Imagination by Bakhtin, and it's a series of 4 different essays. And I am going to read from Discourse in the Novel, where this particular author actually makes the distinction between what is considered a monologic or a singular point of view in a text and something that is more intertextual and dynamic. The best way to understand we call a singular language or a unitary language that offers just a very narrow ideological viewpoint is to look at it as a form of propaganda. Now, propaganda is all around us, of course, and we have propaganda in our everyday political discourse. For example, Democrats and Republicans have very much unitary language and propaganda language that they use in order to strengthen their core, to strengthen the membership within that particular political ideology. And in that case, and I'm reading from the book now, we are talking language not as a system of abstract grammatical categories, but rather language conceived as ideologically saturated, language as a worldview, even as a concrete opinion, ensuring a maximum of mutual understanding in all spheres of ideologic life. Thus, a unitary language gives expression to forces working towards concrete verbal and ideological unification and centralization, which develop in vital connection with the processes of social, political, and cultural centralization. So let me unpack that for us a little bit. What Bakhtin is basically saying is that a unitary language, as opposed to an intertextual language, offers just one point of view. Normally, it is ideologically saturated. That means we are placing in that language not only just one point of view, but we are placing also an ideological, an ethical, a cultural centralization of what we mean to say, right? So when you're looking at the Republicans and the Republicans start saying we need smaller government, that idea of we need smaller government starts to saturate as an ideological position in the party, just about every other position as well, right? It becomes part and partial of everything they talk about. For the Democrats, it's a little bit opposite, right? They want diversity. That is a term that Democrats actually use a great deal. And so we have to ask ourselves, what does diversity mean in relation as an ideological standpoint with all the other policies that Democrats tend to present? So this is what we mean by monological language. We are presenting just one point of view. Now let's move away from that to this idea of intertextuality and diversity in language. Now, at the time that Bakhtin was writing, he didn't have the internet and he didn't have a lot of the technological tools that we have. But he did have the novel to look at, and he was looking at the novel for a form of intertextuality. So when he talks about this dialogue kind of diversity of voices actually in the novel, he's looking at the same thing as our authors are looking at, except that he's just looking at the novel as one genre. Forgive me, I think you can hear my cat in the background, so just go ahead and ignore him. All right, so about the novel, Bakhtin wrote, the style of the novel is to be found in the combination of its styles. The language of a novel is a system of its languages, plural. He also wrote, the novel can be defined as a diversity of social speech types, sometimes even a diversity of languages, and a diversity of individual voices artistically organized. So what he's basically saying is that a novel, a good novel, is not one voice. You have a variety of voices, of cultural points of view. You have a variety of understandings, all put together in order to create this unitary product, which is the novel. Now that we have that background, I think it's an important background to have, let's go back to our book and this particular chapter on intertextuality. On page 79, our authors of Rhetoric Online offer us a broad definition of intertextuality. At the broadest level, one might think of intertextuality as the fact of one text including various references from another text or texts. Thus, intertextuality occurs when one text is in some way connected in a work to other texts in the social and textual matrix. Basically, how many different layers do we have? If we go back to their core example of the Obama's first year and the use of the music from the Gilbert and Sullivan, that is one layer, and we get a cultural understanding of that one particular layer. But then there are many different layers from many different texts involved, all coming together to create one thing. So this is very much like the whole idea of discourse in the novel and what Bakhtin had to say, this idea that many different styles come together and to create a whole. And that's what they're basically talking about when they start talking about the early conceptions of intertextuality. And I think the core of this section is when we get to Kristevia's understanding of intertextuality. And for Kristevia, this is the space in which in any given text, several utterances taken from other texts intersect and neutralize one another in order to create a singular product, right? So when we look at these different voices all coming together to create one product, such as one video, right? We don't look at these different voices as being unique, but we see them coming together, intersecting with each other, and then thereby what you'd call neutralizing each other so that you'd have this one overall new text or video in our case.